Picture this. You wake up in a cramped flat barely big enough to stretch your arms in both directions. The rent you pay each month is more than some people's mortgages for an entire house elsewhere in the country. You spend 2 hours commuting on packed trains where strangers breathe down your neck, only to arrive at an office where you sit at a computer doing work you could easily do from home. By the time you get back, you are too exhausted to enjoy any of the world-class culture, restaurants, or nightlife that supposedly made London worth all this sacrifice in the first place. This is the daily reality for millions of Londoners, and increasingly, people are asking themselves a simple question. Is this actually worth it? The answer, for a growing number of residents, is a resounding no. And what is happening right now represents one of the biggest shifts in British urban living we have seen in generations. Before we dive into why the capital is losing its grip on the nation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we cover stories like this every week, breaking down the trends shaping how and where we live. Now let me tell you the full story of why London is facing an exodus unlike anything we have witnessed before. For decades, London was the undisputed center of opportunity in the United Kingdom. If you wanted to make it in finance, media, tech, law, or almost any professional field, London was where you needed to be. The city attracted the young, the ambitious, and the talented from every corner of Britain and indeed the world. It was a badge of honor to say you lived in London. It meant you were serious about your career, serious about success, and willing to make the sacrifices necessary to play in the big leagues. But somewhere along the way, the equation started to shift. The sacrifices became too great, the rewards too uncertain, and the quality of life too compromised for people to keep pretending it was all worthwhile. Let us start with the numbers, because they tell a stark story. According to data from the Office for National Statistics, London has been experiencing net domestic outflows for years now. This means more British residents are leaving London for other parts of the country than are moving in from elsewhere in Britain. In recent years, this number has accelerated dramatically. We are talking about tens of thousands of people making the decision every single year to pack up their lives and leave the capital behind. During the pandemic, this trend exploded. In the year ending June 2021, London saw a net loss of nearly 100,000 residents to other parts of England and Wales. That is not a typo. Nearly 100,000 people decided that London was no longer where they wanted to build their lives. And while some predicted this would reverse once things returned to normal, the data tells us that the trend has persisted. The pandemic did not create the London exodus. It simply accelerated a movement that was already well underway. So what is driving this mass departure? The answer begins with something that touches every aspect of daily life in the capital. Housing? London's property market has become so disconnected from reality that it almost feels like a cruel joke. The average house price in London now hovers around £530,000. Let that sink in for a moment. The average price, not the price for something fancy in Chelsea or Kensington, but the average across the entire city. For first-time buyers, the situation is even more dire. Even with help-to-buy schemes and other government interventions, the prospect of saving enough for a deposit while simultaneously paying London rents feels impossible for many young professionals. A typical one-bedroom flat in Zone 2 can easily cost £1,800 to £2,200 per month in rent. That is before you factor in council tax, utilities, transport, and the generally higher cost of everything from groceries to a simple pint at the pub. Here is where the mathematics become truly depressing. Financial advisors typically recommend spending no more than 30% of your income on housing. In London, the average renter spends closer to 40 or even 50% of their income just on rent. This leaves precious little for savings, investments, experiences, or building any kind of financial security for the future. Young professionals find themselves trapped in a cycle where they work exhausting jobs to pay for flats they are never home to enjoy, with no prospect of ever saving enough to buy property or achieve the financial stability their parents took for granted. Is it any wonder so many are choosing to opt out entirely? Compare this to what the same money gets you elsewhere. In cities like Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, or Leeds, that £2,000 a month could get you a spacious two-bedroom apartment in the city centre, or even a mortgage on an actual house with a garden in the surrounding areas. In smaller towns and cities, the difference becomes even more dramatic. Suddenly, the dream of homeownership, of having space, of building genuine wealth through property, becomes achievable again. People are running the numbers and realizing that a lower salary outside London often translates to a higher standard of living when housing costs are factored in. A £45,000 salary in Manchester can provide a much more comfortable life than a £65,000 salary in London, once you account for the astronomical difference in living costs. But housing is only part of the equation. The pandemic fundamentally rewired how we think about work, and this has been perhaps the biggest catalyst for the London exodus. Before 2020, remote work was a perk offered by some forward-thinking companies, viewed with suspicion by many traditional employers who believed productivity required physical presence in an office. Then, almost overnight, millions of knowledge workers proved that not only could they work effectively from home, but many actually became more productive without the distractions of open-plan offices and time-consuming commutes. This revelation was transformative. If you could do your job from anywhere with a decent internet connection, why on earth would you pay a premium to do it from one of the most expensive cities on the planet? The numbers support this shift. Surveys consistently show that a significant majority of workers want to maintain some form of flexible or remote working arrangement. Companies have had to adapt or risk losing talent to competitors offering better work-life balance. Even traditional firms in the city have been forced to accept hybrid working models, with many employees coming into the office only 2 or 3 days a week. This has opened up possibilities that simply did not exist before. You can now work for a London-based company while living in Cornwall, the Cotswolds, or the Scottish Highlands. You keep the London salary, or at least a significant portion of it, while enjoying living costs that are a fraction of what you would pay in the capital. For many, this represents the best of both worlds. Then there is the quality of life question, something that becomes harder to ignore the longer you live in London. The pollution is real and measurable. London regularly exceeds safe limits for air pollution, with busy roads and industrial areas posting particularly concerning readings. Studies have linked long-term exposure to London's air quality with increased risks of respiratory diseases, heart problems, and even cognitive decline. You are literally shortening your lifespan by breathing in the capital's air. And for what? The privilege of paying more to live in a smaller space? Crime statistics add another layer to this picture. While London is generally safe by global standards, certain types of crime have seen worrying increases. Knife crime has been a persistent problem, particularly affecting younger residents. Property crime, vehicle theft, and antisocial behavior are facts of life in many neighborhoods. The feeling of safety, that intangible sense of security that allows you to relax and enjoy your surroundings, is something many Londoners feel has been eroding steadily. Talk to people who have left, and you will hear again and again how much they appreciate being able to walk home at night without constantly looking over their shoulder or letting their children play outside without anxiety. The transport system, once a point of pride for London, has become a source of daily frustration for many residents. The tube, while extensive, is overcrowded, expensive, and increasingly unreliable. Station closures, delays, and the oppressive heat of underground platforms during summer months make commuting an ordeal rather than a convenience. A Zone 1 to 6 annual travel card costs well over £2,500, a substantial sum that gets added to the already crushing cost of living in the capital. And despite these high fares, services seem to be deteriorating rather than improving. Compare this to the experience of cycling along country lanes to a local co-working space, or simply walking downstairs to your home office, and the appeal of life outside London becomes even clearer. Let us talk about space, because this is something that becomes almost obsessive for Londoners once they start thinking about leaving. The average new-build flat in London has been shrinking steadily for years. Developers, squeezed by astronomical land values, have responded by creating ever smaller units to maximize profit. There are flats being sold in London that barely exceed 30 square meters, roughly the size of a large shipping container. These are marketed as studio apartments, with prices that would buy you a substantial family home in other parts of the country. Living in such cramped conditions takes a psychological toll that is difficult to quantify but very real. The lack of storage space, the inability to have people over comfortably, the constant bumping into furniture in your own home, it wears you down over time. Contrast this with what leaving London offers. Suddenly, you can have a proper kitchen where more than one person can stand at a time. You can have a garden, actual outdoor space that belongs to you, where you can grow vegetables, have barbecues, or simply sit and breathe fresh air. You can have a spare room for guests, or a home office, or a hobby room. You can have storage for all the things you actually want to own, but could never fit into a London flat. These might sound like small things, but they add up to a fundamentally different quality of life. Ask anyone who has made the move, and they will tell you that having space, real space, feels like a luxury they did not know they were missing. The social fabric of London has also been changing in ways that many long-term residents find troubling. The city has always been expensive, but there was a time when creative types, artists, musicians, writers, and young entrepreneurs could find affordable pockets where they could establish themselves and build communities. Those days are largely gone. Areas that were once bohemian and diverse have been gentrified beyond recognition, priced out of reach for all but the wealthy. The character and soul that made those neighborhoods interesting has been replaced by identikit coffee shops, chain restaurants, and luxury apartment complexes. The working-class communities that gave London its texture and authenticity have been pushed further and further out, often displaced entirely. This hollowing out of London's social diversity has consequences. The city increasingly feels like a place that exists primarily to service the wealthy and the corporations that employ them. The creative energy, the sense of possibility, the mixing of different backgrounds and perspectives that once defined London's appeal, all of this has been diluted. Many who leave talk about reconnecting with genuine community in their new locations, finding that smaller cities and towns offer something London has lost. Neighbors who actually know each other, local businesses run by people who live in the area, a sense of belonging and investment in place that is harder to find in the transient, anonymous sprawl of the capital. For families, the calculus becomes even more decisive. Raising children in London presents challenges that many parents simply do not want to navigate. Good schools are oversubscribed, with parents forced to navigate a stressful and often unfair admission system. The cost of childcare in London is the highest in the country, with nursery fees that can easily exceed £1,500 per month for a full-time place. This means that for many families, one parent's salary goes almost entirely to childcare costs, making the decision to return to work after having children economically questionable. Add to this the lack of outdoor space, the concerns about safety, and the difficulty of finding family-sized accommodation at anything approaching an affordable price, and London starts to look like a very poor choice for raising the next generation. Compare this to the experience of families who have moved out. Children have gardens to play in, local parks that are not overcrowded, schools where they can get places without navigating a Byzantine application process. Parents have more space to work from home, more time with their children because they are not spending hours commuting, and more money left over after housing costs to actually invest in their family's well-being. The trade-offs that once seemed necessary, giving up space and quality of life in exchange for career opportunities, no longer make sense when those career opportunities can be accessed remotely. Now, some will argue that London still offers things you simply cannot get elsewhere. The cultural scene, the restaurants, the diversity, the sense of being at the center of things. And these arguments have merit. London does have world-class museums, theaters, and dining options. It is a global city in a way that no other British city can claim to be. But here is the counter-argument that more and more people are making. How often do you actually take advantage of these things? Be honest with yourself. When you are working 50-hour weeks and spending another 10 hours commuting, when you are exhausted and broke, how often do you actually go to the theater or try that exciting new restaurant? For many Londoners, the cultural offerings of the city are more theoretical than real. They exist as a justification for staying, a story people tell themselves, rather than something they genuinely experience on a regular basis. Meanwhile, the regional cities of Britain have been experiencing a renaissance. Manchester has developed a thriving tech and creative scene. Bristol has become a hub for sustainable business and innovation. Edinburgh combines culture with beauty and a cost of living that, while rising, remains substantially below London's. Birmingham is undergoing massive regeneration. Leeds and Newcastle offer vibrant city living at a fraction of the capital's prices. These cities are not trying to replicate London. They are developing their own identities, their own strengths, and their own appeals. And increasingly, talented people are discovering that you do not need to be in London to have a fulfilling career and an interesting life. The decentralization of opportunity has been one of the most significant trends in British society over the past decade, and it shows no sign of slowing down. The psychological impact of this shift cannot be underestimated. For generations, London has held a kind of gravitational pull on the British imagination. It was where you went if you were serious, if you had ambitions, if you wanted to prove yourself. Leaving was seen as giving up, settling for less, admitting defeat. But that narrative is changing. Increasingly, leaving London is seen not as failure, but as success. It means you have figured out what actually matters, that you value quality of life over status, genuine well-being over the hollow prestige of a London postcode. The people leaving are not just those who could not hack it. They include some of the most talented, most successful, most forward-thinking individuals who have simply decided that the London game is no longer worth playing. What does this mean for London's future? The city is not going to collapse. It remains a global financial center, a tourist destination, and home to world-leading institutions. But it may need to reckon with some uncomfortable truths about its trajectory. If the city continues to price out all but the very wealthy, it risks becoming a hollow playground for the global elite, lacking the diversity and dynamism that made it great in the first place. The young creatives, the entrepreneurs, the risk-takers who drive cultural and economic innovation may increasingly build their futures elsewhere, taking their energy and ideas with them. There are already signs of adaptation. Some employers are accepting that they need to offer London salaries to workers who live outside the capital. Property developers are slowly, reluctantly, acknowledging that they need to build more family-sized units rather than rabbit hutch studios. Local and national government have made noises about leveling up and spreading opportunity more evenly across the country. Whether these changes will be enough to stem the tide remains to be seen. But the era of London's unquestioned dominance, of the assumption that everyone who could would naturally want to live there, that era seems to be ending. For those watching this who are contemplating their own relationship with London, whether to stay, whether to leave, or whether to come in the first place, the message seems clear. The old rules no longer apply. The career advantages of being in London have been dramatically reduced by remote work. The lifestyle sacrifices are harder to justify when comparable opportunities exist in more affordable, more livable locations. The decision to leave is no longer a concession to failure, but potentially a strategic move towards a better life. More and more people are making this calculation, running the numbers, and coming to the same conclusion. Life outside London is not just possible. For many, it is actually better. The exodus from London represents more than just people moving house. It represents a fundamental shift in values, in priorities, and in how we define success. The generation now making these decisions has watched their parents sacrifice everything for careers, only to end up burnt out and wondering what it was all for. They have lived through a pandemic that forced everyone to question their assumptions about work and life. They have access to technology that makes location increasingly irrelevant to professional success. And they are looking at London's offer, the cramped flats, the crushing costs, the pollution, the stress. And they are saying, no thank you. There has to be a better way. And increasingly, they are finding it. If you found this video valuable, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people and supports the channel. Drop a comment below letting me know your thoughts. Are you considering leaving London, or have you already made the move? What has your experience been? I read all the comments and love hearing your perspectives. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We explore topics like this every week, diving deep into the trends shaping our world. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.